Structure Deck The Crimson King releases on September 22nd. Following up the incredible success of Beware of Trap Tricks, Konami decided to make a structure deck that wasn't really any good at all. Let me tell you, if there's one thing white people love, it's making a structure and then saying, okay, now let's do a silly one. Regardless of whether this wave of support makes RDA viable, it does change a bit of how the deck is played, so I guess if you really care, let's break it down. Soul Resonator searches a level 4 or lower fiend on summon and locks you to Dark Synchros, and is Bale links for any card while you control RDA or a synchro that mentions it. Vision Resonator summons itself if there's a high level dark monster on the field, and when it's sent to the graveyard, searches a spell or trap that mentions RDA. Bone Archfiend can pitch a card to summon himself from hand or graveyard but lock you to Dark Dragon Synchros, and can mill a Fiend Tuner to modulate a monster's level by 1. Crimson Gaia adds Red Dragon Archfiend from deck to hand. Real! But for real, it adds either RDA or a card that mentions it from deck or graveyard to hand. Also, if a monster on the field is destroyed, it can reborn RDA, and if RDA attacks, you can book your opponent's whole field. Fiendish Golem banishes a monster with 2000 or more attack until the next end phase, then if you control RDA or a synchro that mentions it, sets Fiendish Chain from deck. And Red Zone is a continuous trap that can reborn a banished DDS, and when your opponent activates something while you control RDA or a synchro that mentions him, you can pop a card on the field. And finally, Scar Red Dragon Archfiend is treated as RDA, and if it's sent from the field to the graveyard, summons an RDA from extra deck, then pops all your opponent's attack position monsters if it was synchroed off for a DDS. These cards breathe new life into Resonator, giving you actual one-card combos, better extenders, and lines that let you go wider than Supernova Pass. Starting from just Crimson Gaia, you can end on Supernova with Red Zone to summon it back, and use its full board wipe and additional time. Soul Resonator can search geez, way too many cards for an every target reviewed, but most importantly Bone Archfiend, whose mill can set up Crimson Resonator and smooth over Soul's otherwise rough level to make Red Rising and reborn the Crimson. You can also use Bone to pitch Crimson from hand if you draw into it, or if you use Soul's Search on it, in which case it can mill Obsessive Oovaloop, which can add an otherwise unrepresented level of tuner to your combos, and set up Banished Synchros to bring back with Dissipator and Red Zone. And simply resolving Crimson can get you to both Dissipator and Abyss by summoning Vision and Synchron Resonator and going through Scar Red, which will float into an RDA, another 8 stars of material to work with. When you sync off Vision, it'll search Red Zone, and when you sync off Synchron to make Abyss, you can add back Vision, which is still yet to use its own summoning condition, since it was summoned from deck. Speaking of Vision, his effect reads pretty crazy, but unfortunately the best RDA related back row, like Red Rain and Time to Stand Up, don't actually mention RDA specifically. And aside from the 2 new ones, the existing search targets are extremely underwhelming, like this Burn Damage Deflector or this Abysmal Pot of Greed. Red Zone is pretty good, but has similar pitfalls since the best RDA end bosses also don't mention RDA, so to enable its pop effect, you'll have to leave up the original, not a great option since its terribly aged effect will blow up your whole board if you go to end phase with it, although that can be accounted for by wasting Soul's Bale Links Protect, or you could end with Scar Red on the field, an okay option since if your opponent destroys it, it can float into RDA, keeping Red Zone live. You could of course banish an RDA with Oovaloop for Red Zone to bring back on your opponent's turn, but that'll interfere with your ability to do the double Supernova play. Here's a thought, Dissipator using its pop effect will trigger Crimson Gaia to reborn an RDA, but that makes your interruptions a bit sequential, less flexible, you know? One build I found interesting for the deck is the Bestial variant. Some level 6 extenders can help if you get disrupted. Branded Beast gives you an additional pop, which can trigger Crimson Gaia whenever you want. And Branded Etude can be used to make Baron with Lubellion and a leftover 2 once you're free from the Dark Dragon Synchro Lock. Or it can be used to make King Calamity on your opponent's turn, which the deck otherwise just can't do, believe it or not. Everyone and their mother no issues making this guy, but the deck it was designed for sucks ass at it. What is this, Ice Barrier? All these interactions rely on drawing Lubellion, so maybe brush up on small world lines. Thankfully, Santa Claus bridges literally everything. If you want a list that's seen success, I yoinked this from Road to the King, and yeah, we got a couple things to talk about here. First and most importantly, we don't have Earthbound Prisoner Stone Sweeper yet, an important piece of this deck since it searches any of your Resonators, hugely expanding consistency. No real ETA on it either, since we've already gone through Battles of Legend earlier this year, and although Earthbound is getting a support card in Agov, importing all 9 Earthbound cards in the import slots on that set is a tough sell. Also, we don't got Chaos Ruler. Kinda hard building a whole deck around Dark Dragon Synchros without, the good one. Escator Dawnwalker is a neat method of making a free Scar Red, but by extension you could also throw in Supe Duskwalker to make Red Rising Dragon, which will reborn the Resonator you discarded as cost. In tandem with Crimson Resonator, this is functionally the same as the Soul Resonator 1-card combo. They're also on Golem, which I don't know, it's a Farfa. That isn't terrible. Last thing I'd like to point out is that they're playing Ancient Pixie Dragon, the only generic level 7 Dark Dragon Synchro, but the TCG just got Quibelt the Blade Dragon, a simple pop on summon that'll come up much more often than a card that relies on your opponent having a field spell up. Here's where I left off on the pure build before I woke up from the 2-week-long RDA hyperfixation and had to ask my mom what day it was. The deck's still kinda bricky, underpowered for how involved the combos can be, and loses to the same sort of outs that plague better synchro combo decks like Monadium. If you want to play the deck, just prepare to be droll rolled, nibbed, kaiju, dark ruled, and just plain beaten by the die roll. Outside of the deck the cards were made for, there's very little that can be splashed in, but there have been a couple of success stories, like this Labyrinth list that uses Soul Resonator as a normal summon to search furniture. Not a hard recommend from me, since Soul Resonator kinda gets stuck on the field after that because of its lock. Then there's this Vanquish Soul list that uses Vision Resonator as a free level 2 tuner to special summon that can be used with Heavy Borger or Dia Bellstar, stay tuned, to make Power Tool Braver Dragon as a way to search Raisin. After that, Vision Resonator will trigger, searching Crimson Gaia to search another Vision Resonator and retain a Dark in hand to reveal. Only notable reprint in the set is King Calamity because it tells us we still have until they're done selling the structure before they'll ban it. Good news for anyone planning on investing in Valiant Smashers this November, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's like no staples or decent non-engine in here, so if you for some reason want to make a $30 build, you might want to max out on the unsearchable traps and just play Supernova Control. I'd also like to point out that they gave us Dawnwalker instead of Duskwalker. Fuck you. Thank you all for watching, especially my patrons, and a special thank you to those two guys who said hi to me at YCS Vancouver. Anyone who was there and didn't say hello, you didn't miss much. I am not great at making conversation. Here's me with the mat I won after former European champion Marcus Patel knocked me out of qualifying for day 2. That's about as much as I can drag this episode, but I'll be damned if one more deconstructing episode fails to hit mid-roll, so to bring us home, I'm gonna very slowly read the entire card text of Absolute Power Force, a card from this set that I thought just sucked too hard to say anything about. Target 1 Red Dragon Archfiend you control. If that monster you control battles an opponent's monster this turn, apply these effects until the end of the damage step. It gains 1000 attack. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects. If it attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. Any battle damage your opponent takes from that battle is doubled.
Good night, everybody!